Are you an aspiring creative in entertainment, business, fashion, design, or the arts? Do you want to elevate your creative passion project to the next level? Then this show is for you. Whether you want a career in television, film, radio, literature, music, or beyond, Creative Breakthrough will show you how to take your dreams and turn them into reality. This show will not only leave you feeling motivated and inspired, but also provide you real-life tools to pursue the creative journey you have always wanted. I'm your host, creative coach, and chicken wing lover, Shireen Kassab, aka the Funny Brown Girl. Yes, I have an unhealthy obsession with chicken wings. Now, get ready to flex your creative muscle. Today's episode is brought to you by HoorayForCBD.com. If you struggle with anxiety, whether it's performance anxiety, social anxiety, or generalized anxiety, CBD is a non-addictive, legal, and natural product to help you find relief. I use CBD every day to take control of my mood, reduce my inflammation, and decrease my stress levels. After a long day at the office, CBD gummies help me relax and focus on my creative passion. If you're looking for relief from anxiety, stress, or insomnia, visit HoorayForCBD.com. Armed with a prestigious MBA, Aliya was on track to be a successful banker on Wall Street when she decided to leave her coveted job and trained at the International Culinary Center. Aliya LeeKing now calls herself a chef, cookbook author, television personality, mother, and now app developer. Aliya has worked at a number of restaurants around New York City, including Junoon, which won a Michelin Star, before writing her first cookbook, Exotic Table: Flavors, Inspiration, and Recipes from Around the World to Your Kitchen. Aliya has been a guest chef on NBC's Today Show, a judge on the Food Network, a culinary expert on MSNBC's Morning Joe, and has been widely covered in publications like Food and Wine, Vogue India, Shape, Oprah, Eater, and Food Republic. Aliya is now head of culinary for Real Eats. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Welcome to the guest chair, Aliya.
Thank you so much for having me, Sharon.
No problem. I can't believe after all these years we're finally connecting again.
I know, and you just told me the story of how you heard me speak recently, and it's so random how we're all connected.
Yes, it's a small world.
Totally.
So I always start with the same question for all my guests. So I want to start with starting from the beginning. When and how did your creative journey start?
Sure. I mean, I think for me, and I think for most people, the creative journey starts when you're really young, right? I mean, that's when your mind is free enough to think about all the things that you want to do and how you want to spend your time and what's interesting to you. And, we all sort of were in art classes and music classes, and I was cooking alongside my mom and things that sparked a lot of creativity when I was young. I was a dancer. I played the piano and the guitar. I taught myself the guitar. I was constantly kind of dabbling in different creative fields. I was cutting up my mom's napkins to make clothes for dolls. Like there was a lot of kind of sketchy things that happen when you're younger. And, I think as I got older, probably not unlike a lot of people, that sort of that immigrant ethos and that need for security in your job kind of sort of delimits what is your natural next step. Besides education kind of being on the table, it was really, what does that serve? How does that serve you? What is going to happen after school? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you able to sustain yourself? And all of which are really important questions, but some of which also mitigate the creative process, I think, right?
There is definitely that immigrant mentality that puts the caboose on all that stuff and says, okay, where are you going to school? And then how are you making money?
Well, I mean, that's natural for everybody. And I think as a parent, now that I'm a parent, I mean, I completely understand. You want to know that your child, I mean, my daughter is 5 or almost 5, and I'm doing things right now to kind of foster independence. Because I'm like, I'm thinking from now, I want to make sure that she's self-sufficient. And I think that's the natural kind of process of parenting. So no one can blame them.
So you were an investment banker. So you had this great Wall Street job, great salary coming in. You had your MBA. How did you, when you decided to leave that job, how did you think you were going to make money after culinary school?
Well, that's a great question. I really felt positive that I could carve out this niche for myself, space that was not as diverse as we'd all like it to be. And so, in terms of, I had saved a lot. And I have a very supportive husband as well, who was just like, follow your dreams, go. And, my thought was, it's going to take a little time. I need to earn my stripes, and I need to gain some real background and understanding of this industry and of my craft as a chef. And then after that, I'll be able to kind of go. And so it's been nice. Obviously, I knew that I could always work in restaurants, which is, not the best paying job, but it is still an income. And so, I kind of just went for it, and really just risked it all, risked it all to, and I also just, I think I was definitely a little bit foolish, and I think my naivete was helpful, because I was like, oh, I'm going to make it back. I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do it. Like that was my attitude. And so, I went ahead. I enrolled in culinary school. I worked in restaurants. Some of them I worked for pay, some I worked for free. I really tried to learn across cuisines. And I was lucky enough to get a really great job at the last place, Junoon, which was the last restaurant I worked at, where I was a culinary creative director. And, at that time I was also doing stuff on TV, and I wrote my first cookbook then. So, it's been an interesting path.
You mentioned you thought you could carve out a small niche for yourself. When you talk like that, had you researched the industry and decided, okay, this is where I'm going to focus my attention?
Yeah. I mean, I think kind of naturally I was just looking at what's out there and whether it spoke to me. And I didn't see enough that spoke to me and spoke to the way that I want to cook at home, and this concept of multiculturalism, and how the United States demographics are shifting, and the fact that, the number of brown people out there is going to be increasing, the number of multiracial marriages is increasing, and, what are these second generation kids eating at home, and how are they taking the foods that they grew up with and adapting it to what they want to eat here. I look at someone like a David Chang and what he was doing, 10 years ago. And it was really that idea of taking his Korean heritage and kind of bringing it into a space where it made sense for what he wanted to eat now. And I think it's that simple. And so that was sort of, for me, I just felt like, I come from Pakistani, East African roots. My husband's West Indian, Trinidad, which has a huge influence between Indian and Chinese influences on the West Indian food. I mean, the stuff I cooked last night alone, I made peas and rice with an East African stewed beef, and that was dinner. It was Trini peas and rice with East African stewed beef. That was literally our dinner last night. And
wow, I'm coming over tomorrow.
It's really good. The East African beef is it's like a green chili cilantro. It's a delicious beef, but it made sense to me. It makes sense together, and it did. And so kind of, what does that look like? And what are some dishes? How are ways to showcase that in a way that's, that's easy to be replicated by someone who just wants to try that food? And that was my niche, right? Or that is my niche.
So I want to take a step back. So you're sitting at your desk in New York at this investment bank. You're getting this hefty paycheck at the end of the week. When did you realize you could turn your passion for cooking into your new career?
I was cooking, I would say, just recreationally, like crazy. I was, I was dreaming about dishes at my desk, and I was, getting the ingredients delivered so that I could, I'd get home at 10 or 11. I'd be up till 2 or 3 in the morning cooking and making this dish that I had in my head that I needed to make. It was my creative outlet. It was what I was, I was throwing parties every weekend. I was having people over. I was, it was kind of it was an obsession. And then I decided to take a class. And it was really in that class and understanding the kind of the format of cooking professionally, because it was taught by chefs and it was their stories, and it was also kind of a traditional cooking class and learning kind of some of the steps to the building blocks to making a great dish. And it was in that moment that I really just took a step back and said, oh, I could actually do this as a career. I could actually make this into something. And I was in that class with my mom. So that was a little bit of a shock to her when she found that out in that class, that I was going to quit and become a chef. But it was a really quick, it really clicked immediately in the professional kitchen that I could turn it into a career.
And how long before you finally quit?
A couple months, 3 months. Yeah.
And when it clicked, it was like, did it click saying I could do this? Like I could be
Yes.
in a kitchen cooking for people?
It was this idea that no matter what direction I went in food, I fire on all synapses in the kitchen. So I'm going to continue to want to learn. I'm going to continue to want to grow as a chef because I love this. Really, that's kind of the simplified version of it. It was this idea that, being in a kitchen makes me extremely happy. I can spend an entire day concocting recipes or working on the line, and I would enjoy myself. So, I think that would make me work harder. And I just felt like all of those things together were the right formula for dedicating yourself to a new craft.
So I want to go back to your mom's reaction. What were your parents' reaction when you told them?
Yeah, I would say that they were none too pleased about this. I think, like any parent, there's fear. There's how is this? What is this space? Like how are you going to do this? And thinking about having a daughter, that wants to do this as well, and being in a kitchen that might be male dominated. And I was kind of like, this is light work compared to finance. I mean, if you're talking about, that's not a big deal, but, I think there was definitely some trepidation at that time, but they worked through it. And, I think they've seen kind of the fruits of my labor, and it's all made sense to them now. It's a kind of a test of time.
So I guess when you told your parents and they came to terms with it, was there trepidation around how you were going to make money, or was it more around like you're throwing away this great education?
All of it. I definitely had people come up to me, friends' moms, and say, "So are you going to put that business degree to use now that you've become a chef?" And that all that good stuff. And I'm like, well, actually, yes, it's all incorporated. Don't worry.
Yes, because you do use your business degree still, right?
Yeah, if you're running your own business, you have to. And if you're thinking about, and most recently I've created a children's app to teach kids about world culture through food. And, that's required me to kind of learn a whole new space and sort of pivot in food in a different way. And all of that sort of background and discipline and, degree has helped me kind of understand how to move forward in that.
So you touched on this a little bit about your naivety and when you left your job. What advice would you have for others looking back on how you left your job and started at culinary school? Like what advice would you have for others who are trying to make that severe switch in their careers?
Oh, I would say to go work in whatever space you want to be in first. Before quitting, like not necessarily work in quotation marks, like, if it's a job that's a week, that works on the weekends, go work on a weekend somewhere, shadow somebody, be in that space, go really do your diligence before you just kind of up and leave. That's what I would say. I was lucky because I did that and I loved it, but I know, like I'll tell that just in the culinary space, let me just take that as an example. Half the kids I went to culinary school with didn't end up working in the culinary space afterwards.
And because they didn't like it.
They couldn't really find their footing, or they didn't really want to be in restaurants, and the jobs that are outside of restaurants, they didn't want to be in restaurants or catering. And so then it was kind of like trying to find your place in, let's say, the food media world or writing or all of those other things is not always the easiest. And so, some of them just are great cooks now but they didn't really move into that space. And I think, kind of understanding what you're getting into really well before making that jump. I think that's the biggest thing. And I think, just like I said, for my daughter, if she wanted to leave one job to do another, I'd make sure that she understood what she was getting into. That's, I think, the most important thing.
So with such a demanding job, did you had time to go and shadow other people?
No, but I think having worked, having taken that class in culinary school, and that culinary class for a weekend, and kind of understanding what that would look like, I just kind of knew what it was. And I also knew that I was kind of making my own space a little bit. So that was a bit different than just leaving and knowing, than if I had said I'm going to work in restaurants and I want to run my own restaurant.
Do you want?
I think that's a totally different. No, I never want to. If you're going to ask me if I ever, I'd never want to run my own restaurant.
So you went to school, you went to culinary school, and then it sounds like your career really took off. I mean, your restaurant won a Michelin Star, you put out a cookbook, you had multiple TV opportunities. Walk us through how you were able to rise so fast in your new career.
I think that I was a little bit older when I was closer to 30 when I became a chef. So I really had an agenda. And so I feel like, even from the second that I could start interning in culinary school, I was interning and I was, sort of chasing down opportunities in different restaurants and really trying to grow myself as a chef and cultivate my own style of cooking and my own story in the space. And, I think there's that piece of it. And then there's a lot of luck that goes into it too, that people downplay. But I think I had a lot of opportunities, maybe through networking and meeting people and getting introduced to other people. But I think that there was a lot of luck that came into play. I mean, even my cookbook was a publisher literally reached out to me via email, on my info at email off my website. Not even sure now in this space, given how saturated that's a possibility, and so, that was a really lucky kind of piece to what I was doing. And, so I think it's sort of a combination of work and luck.
Are you one of those people who makes like a goal sheet or a vision board where you put all these things up there, like you want to have a cookbook and you want to be on TV? And do you kind of track your life in that sense, or is it kind of just whatever comes your way, comes your way?
That's hard. I think that I kind of already know in my head what I want, and then I live and breathe that. I don't necessarily need to kind of track it out on a piece of paper. I actually did for purposes of pitching to an agent, but I would not have done that without that opportunity, if that makes sense. It would have been in my head what I wanted, and I would have kind of just chipped away at everything to get to those points.
Got it.
And a lot of it is sort of those opportunities coming along and you sort of seeing that being the right time and all of those kinds of things. I was lucky that, obviously, like I said, that the cookbook people came knocking. At the same time, I was pregnant as I was writing my cookbook. And I had to photograph it myself, and there was no photography budget. And in fact, my agent told me not to take it because it wasn't as lucrative as they'd want it to be. And I said, it doesn't matter. I need to write a cookbook. I need to start to establish myself in that media space. And so I did it against other people's wishes. So, I think you kind of have to figure out what opportunities make sense for you and are going to get you closer to your goals pretty much every day. And that's really the measurement. Every day is what I'm doing, getting me closer to whatever these goals are that I have.
So do you have an agent? Was the agent for writing a book, or was the agent for your publicity?
No, it was in my overall, William Morris represents me. So it was just my overall agent that would handle any TV, books, anything.
Okay. So chefs have an agent then to help them with the publicity and the PR.
Well, that's different. Publicity and PR is different. So publicity and PR is someone you actually pay to work on your behalf to publicize you. An agent fields larger deals and opportunities, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Sometimes there's a little crossover, like let's say if a PR person books you on like the Today Show, but your agent could easily do the same thing.
So you got an agent before the book came out,
Yeah, that didn't even make sense. That's what I mean about opportunity and luck, because I had an agent and I was a chef at a restaurant, and it didn't even make sense. And I'm like, this is what I could be. Here's my deck. Help me out. Help me get there.
So that's awesome. That's why I'm sorry if I'm asking questions about this, but I didn't realize chefs and restaurants had agents. I
don't think they all do. I think that if they have a media agenda, some do, and some get signed on. And I was just lucky, I think, at that time to meet the right people and to meet a management team that would sort of come on with me.
Okay. So you had you coming out of culinary school, you had a media agenda. Like you knew where you wanted to take your career in the sense of a cookbook and TV. Okay.
I did.
So you had planned it out.
Yeah. And I think for me, again, this sort of cultural diversity in food and multiculturalism was my agenda. And I felt like the most efficient way to get it out there was through media.
You talk about the multi-layer niche that you created. What else did you do to sort of differentiate yourself from everyone else out there to make yourself successful?
I think that to differentiate, I mean, I feel like, your personality and kind of who you are just differentiates you in many ways. I think, again, I didn't take a traditional approach. I didn't work in one restaurant and work my way up. I kind of cultivated a style of cooking by learning across cuisines and, going into people's homes and traveling and learning from local people in different locations that I traveled to. That was all sort of part of my education as a chef. I mean, it's what I'm passionate about. It's what it's what I'd love to understand. It's sort of this anthropology of food that's super interesting to me. But I think at the same time, it did differentiate myself.
I mean, you seem very confident in a male dominant industry. So I can, from what you said earlier, it seems like being a woman of color actually helped you create your niche. Was there any actual challenges that came with being a woman of color in the industry?
I've sat down with networks and people in production companies who've said, nobody's going to understand that. It's too obscure. It's not going to appeal to the mainstream. That's something I've definitely heard. And I just don't care. And so, I just keep going. I just keep going with it. But I think that, yes, there is that, like I look at some of these networks and you see mac and cheese being made 50,000 different ways, but you're trying to come in and show, something else. I don't know. I think that it's all going to correct itself. It's just a matter of timing. And I think audiences are changing, and the millennial audience is going to be a very different animal as they age than the traditional people that have watched TV. And I mean, forget TV. Let's look at the OTTs and the Amazon and Netflix of the world and the type of, and we can already see a shift in kind of food programming and what's interesting to them. So, I definitely have faced a little bit of tension around, wanting to showcase ethnic cuisines or that sort of thing. But I think it's all going to right itself, and I think it'll all change.
When you say all change, like, do you think it has to wait until we get a new president, or it's going to change with or without him? Or do you just mean with generations?
I really just mean generations and demographics and all of that stuff, but I don't even want to give, let's keep this on a high note today because I can't even process that.
So we'll switch gears a little bit. You just launched an app. So, I mean, so you're entering the technology space now, you're diversifying. What inspired you to kind of move into that space?
Oh, my daughter. So, kind of going back to this concept of being, it's like every layer is sort of now starting to come through in terms of, my watching the stuff that my daughter's watching or what she's what she's playing with on the app, and just feeling like there was a lack of diversity. I just felt like I can't just talk about, I need to do something. I need to create something. And then, thinking about food and connecting with kids, it was just a natural way to teach kids what I think is one of the most important things, which is cultural empathy. And really, my food is meant to teach that too. It's like, how do you get people to be, particularly in this political environment, going back to that, culturally empathetic to other people? We're going to be in a position where I think 60% of the world's children, 40% of the world's children will be in Africa by 2030. And then, 80% of the world's population is going to be between Africa and Asia over the next 30
That's
years.
Incredible.
So, we are, I think the thing that I always say is I want children to understand that they are part of this great, big, wonderful world, but they're not the only part. And so this to me was my way of sort of getting all these layers of who I am as a personality, all of the layers of my personality into sort of a product. It was, a niche that I see as a caregiver, as the primary caregiver of my daughter, and then kind of combining that with being a chef and then my background and understanding business and that sort of thing. And that's kind of how this was created and the inception of it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's important for creatives to find different avenues to sort of create their business? So not just focusing on one thing, like being a chef, but like sort of diversifying?
I think that's what I do because I hope to always evolve as a person. And I feel that evolving and I just watched Ariana Huffington give a speech, and she was talking about the importance of pivoting. And that's how I feel as well. I feel like, you have to continually pivot. If you see, like, for example, I'd love to do more in media, but I found that, this industry is really saturated in terms of the types of the way people are consuming content. It's at a rate that I can't quite keep up with unless I do a YouTube and I do this and do all of these other things, and grow a huge following based on people that have already been doing it for 10 years. It's difficult to sort of keep up with that. And so, for me, it was, how do I still get the same message out there and through a different medium? And maybe my audience is slightly different as well. And you get kids when they're younger. And I think, and to me, there's so many things that are important about kids cooking and this next generation understanding it, because it dovetails with nutrition and health. I mean, all of the studies are people that cook for themselves are healthier. We need more of that. Mm-hmm. And so it feels like, in terms of a mission and what I've always wanted to kind of accomplish, it allows me to pivot and have a kind of more of a mission driven goals as I'm, not that I didn't with what I was doing before, but it feels closer to home just having a child.
So you've launched the app now, like what are the next steps in your career? Like what else are you looking at doing to kind of, like you said, be on the edge and create new opportunities for yourself?
Well, I'm looking to grow this app into a larger brand as well. To that end, I'd like to do an animated series and create digital content. And I'm actually talking to production partners and animation studios now.
Oh, awesome.
And that's what I'd love to do that. And it also, for me, takes it a little bit off of me as a personality, which, as you get older and you get a little grumpier, it's kind of, I think it was wonderful to write these stories, and I'd love to continue to create content around this.
Have you faced new challenges though, now that you're in a new space?
Oh my gosh, of course. It's like every day it's waking up and learning something new and trying to, I'm constantly learning and constantly meeting new people and trying to take temperatures and understand industry norms and, figure out the next way to grow. And, it's constantly a challenge, but it's pretty fun. It's kind of fun to be able to do that as well.
What's been probably the biggest challenge you've had?
I think my initial shift to being a chef, the biggest challenge was accepting that what I knew before really didn't apply. Mm-hmm. You kind of grow, as you grow up, you're kind of taught, you're kind of creating a resume to somebody sometimes, right? Some of us are, what school you go to, what college you go to, what your job history is, when you put all of that on paper, does it all flow nicely into whatever this sort of next step is? And for me, none of that really mattered. I mean, I could have done that I could have gone into culinary school when I was 16. It didn't really matter that I had done all these other things when I walked into a kitchen. And so it mattered to me, it mattered to my long-term strategy, but it didn't matter to the present, to that moment of being in a kitchen or working in a restaurant or any of those things. And so that for me was a bit of a, from an ego perspective, you kind of have to take it down and just start over. And I think that was a challenge.
Was it hard? Like, was that ego taking a step back and start feeling like, oh my God, I'm so old starting this new venture? Did that actually make you hustle harder?
Oh yeah, for sure. Definitely. Cause I was like, I need to make up for lost time. I need to go. I'm so impatient. So I'm always like, everything that happens, I'm like, this should have happened 3 years ago. Like I'm that type of person. So it was kind of frustrating in the beginning, but it was good. I feel like it was so good for me. I feel like I grew emotionally and socially from it. Like I grew a lot from it.
So what advice do you have for other creatives on their journey?
I think that My biggest piece of advice is not to listen to anybody else but yourself. It's like, if you have it really comes down to, like I said about work and opportunity and luck, but I think that carving out your own vision is probably the most important thing. And, again, going back to that weakness being your strength, what makes you stand out, what makes people kind of wonder about what you're doing is what's going to make you stand out. So just keep going at it.
And so don't listen to your parents.
Man, I have this phrase that I was thinking about telling my daughter when she gets older, which is like, don't let anyone, even if it's me, don't let anyone stop you. But then I'm like, do I really want to give her that advice? Do I really want it to be? I think ultimately you're responsible for your own life. So you have to listen to your own voice.
I'm sure your parents are now very proud of you. I mean, they never were not proud of you, but I don't think
they're pretty happy.
You haven't let them down.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump into the lightning round. The lightning round is I'm going to ask you 5 questions, rapid fire, and you just answer the first thing that you think of. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Keep going.
What is a written or verbal resource you would recommend to creatives on their journey to read or listen to?
Ayn Rand, The Fountainhead.
Who inspires you and why?
My mom inspires me just because she's hustled for so long, and she's never complained. Like, she's just she's a surgeon. She just retired, but she worked for 40 years. I never heard her complain about her job. I never, she was up at the crack of dawn. She was home after we were in bed. And, that level of sort of dedication has always inspired me.
What's a habit that's helped you on your journey?
Discipline.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I want my children to be amazing people.
Well, Aliya, where can our listeners find you online if they wanted to get in touch or follow your where you'll be next in New York?
Sure. Yeah, no. My Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter is at Aliya LeeKing. And I also have a website that's www.aliyaleekong.com. So between those, you'll find me.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Aliya.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, before you hit pause, did you find this episode helpful and enjoyable? If so, could you leave an Apple Podcast, aka iTunes review? It'll take you less than 1 minute and mean the world to me. The more ratings and reviews the show gets, the more people are able to find this podcast. If you're unsure how to leave a review, no worries. If you're on your iPhone or iPad, go to the homepage of this show and scroll down to Write a Review. Click on it and you'll be able to rate and review the show. If you're on a Mac, from iTunes, go to the show homepage and on the top, click Ratings and Reviews. Also, please subscribe to get the latest episodes once they drop. If you enjoyed the episode and know someone who would love it, please share. From your iPhone, click on the icon with 3 dots and then share via social media, email, or text. If you want to hear more, head over to funnybrown.com/podcast. You can also find me online. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Funny Brown Girl. Also, sign up for my free newsletter for more tips to advance your creative journey at funnybrowngirl.com/subscribe. And again, if you enjoyed the show, do me a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. Now, go flex your creative muscle and keep winning. Thank you for listening. See you next week.